There exists a type of creature in this world, discovered by only a few people, but never confirmed to exist. We refer to these creatures collectively as unidentified mysterious animal, unconfirmed biological entity, abbreviated as UMA. Hello everyone, welcome to the UMA series videos. In the western United States, in California, lies an ancient and mysterious land, the Santa Lucia Mountains. With its breathtaking natural scenery, this place has become one of California's most famous tourist attractions. At the same time, a chilling legend adds a layer of mystery to these deep mountains. For centuries, people in this region have occasionally reported seeing a strange humanoid figure flickering on the mountain ridges, as if it were a visitor from another world. And this brings us to today's topic, the humanoid spirits of Western American folklore, the Dark Watchers. The name Dark Watchers comes from a similar term in Spanish. It is said that these mysterious beings appeared long before the Spanish arrived in California, in the 18th century, and were already known to the local indigenous American mythology. Also contains records of this shadowy figure. When the English-speaking Americans claimed sovereignty over the region, they even felt as if they were being watched by mysterious figures from the mountains. The Dark Watchers are usually described as massive humanoid spirits with towering stature, standing between 7 and 15 feet tall. Some descriptions mention that they wear long black cloaks and wide-brimmed hats, holding a staff in their hands. They are often seen at dusk or dawn, silently standing on ridges or mountain peaks, watching those walking along the trails. But whenever someone tries to get closer, they vanish instantly without a trace. This legend is particularly prevalent in the coastal regions of Western California, from Monterey in the north to Avila Beach, especially in the Big Sur area. People fear the shadow standing atop the mountains, as it is said to be an omen of misfortune. One of the most famous written records of the Dark Watchers comes from the 1938 short story collection by American author John Steinbeck. In the third chapter of The Long Valley, titled Flight, it tells the story of a 19-year-old boy named Pepe, who, while out to get medicine, accidentally killed a man in a drunken incident. When he returned home, his mother told him to flee on horseback, and warned him, when you reach the high mountains, if you see the Dark Watchers, do not approach them, and do not try to speak to them. Soon after Pepe entered the mountains, he saw the figure. The original passage from the story reads, Pepe looked back over his shoulder every minute in bewilderment, his eyes fixed on the peaks ahead, and once, on a bare ridge in the distance, he saw a black figure, but quickly turned his eyes away, because that was a Dark Watcher. No one knows who they are, or where they live, but the best approach is to ignore them, and show no interest. They usually do not disturb those who remain on the trail, and stay focused on their own path. As evening approached, when Pepe looked up again, at a desolate mountain peak, he once again saw the Watcher. A man's silhouette stood upon a rock. He quickly looked away, to avoid appearing curious. Moments later, when he looked up again, the shadow had already vanished. In 1937, American poet John Jeffers, inspired by Scottish ballads, wrote a narrative poem collection, Tamar and Other Poems, in which he wrote, as he neared the slopes of Holland, he thought he saw someone by the mountainside, gazing intently into the valley. This young man, exhausted and dulled, grew up among the mountains, and was later educated in the city. He easily recalled his lost childhood, and thought that perhaps it was one of those watchers that often haunt the coastal mountains. They appear human to the eye, but they are certainly not human. They move along the ridges, observing. But as the young man approached, he recognized the tattered clothes and pale hair, even the slanted forehead, and the deep furrows from the eyes to the chin. So, when the figure turned toward him in the quiet twilight, revealing its face, he was not surprised. A more obscure record comes from 2006, in Weird California, edited by American conspiracy theorist Greg Bishop. It states that in the 1960s, a local high school principal, while hunting in the Santa Lucia Mountains, spotted a tall black figure, wearing a hat and a long cloak, standing on a rock in the canyon, slowly observing the surroundings. But when the principal called out to his fellow hunters, the ghostly figure vanished instantly. In 2014, Thomas Steinbeck, the son of the aforementioned American writer John Steinbeck, teamed up with California artist Benjamin Brode to publish a book, Taming the Dark Watchers: Landscapes and Legends of Big Sur. The book documents John's childhood, encounters with the Dark Watchers, as well as testimonies from his grandmother, Olive Hamilton, and Billy Post, a descendant of early settlers of the Sur Grande region. They firmly believe that the Dark Watchers exist, that they are a mysterious group. Both Native Americans and Spanish settlers knew about them. They lived in the mountains and canyons of Big Sur. John's grandmother, Olive, even claimed to have interacted with the Dark Watchers, leaving them fruit, walnuts, and flowers, and in return, receiving feathers, shells, and pine nuts. However, since this book has not yet been fully released, I could only gather information from reviews and summaries to understand its general content. In reality, complete eyewitness reports of the Dark Watchers are quite rare, aside from the descriptions provided by the artists in their books. Most accounts of Dark Watcher sightings come from scattered replies on online blogs. The only systematic collection or documentation of witness accounts comes from a website called Shadow Observers. On this website, nearly all information revolves around the Dark Watchers, and in the sightings section, reports include a 2013 sighting by a woman named Elizabeth Benitez from San Mateo. She reported seeing the mysterious figure near the San Luis Obispo Reservoir. During the daytime, she and her friend were driving back from Los Angeles when they suddenly noticed a massive humanoid figure standing at the edge of the mountains in the distance. It was wearing a long black cloak like the Grim Reaper, leaning near a small body of water, holding a staff in its hand. Both of them reported seeing the figure. The sighting lasted about 5 seconds, and they were convinced that the Dark Watchers were real. That same year, in Hollister, California, a man named Brian also reported seeing the shadowy figure. He described the figure as wearing a massive cloak, with broad, straight shoulders, and slightly hunched posture, standing at approximately 10 feet tall, similar to other reports. These sightings on the website mostly come from unknown sources. A few linked reports are from various blogs and forums, making their credibility questionable. As for whether the Dark Watchers are an actual entity, some kind of supernatural phenomenon, or merely an accumulation of myths, public opinion and scholarly views remain divided. In 2016, American skeptic Brian Dunning analyzed the Dark Watchers story on his blog. He argued that the entire Dark Watchers phenomenon might be the product of imaginative storytelling and fabrication, because nearly every media source covering this topic cites the same 3 pieces of evidence: John Steinbeck's flight, Jeffers' poetry, and the Chumash oral myths passed down over generations. However, Dunning pointed out that the Chumash Native Americans do not seem to have any legends about the Dark Watchers. He referenced American anthropologist Thomas Blackburn's 1975 publication, December's Child, a Chumash narrative. This is considered one of the most detailed and authoritative studies on Chumash mythology and beliefs. But in it, there is no mention of the so-called Dark Watchers. The only vaguely similar creature described is something called the Lunasish, which the Chumash believed. The world we live in is an island surrounded by oceans and belongs to the middle world. The sun, moon, and other celestial bodies belong to the upper world, while the Lunasish come from a filthy underworld. They enter the middle world at night, spreading disease and misfortune. These are strange creatures, capable of transforming into human form, but no records mention them being black in color, or habitually standing on mountain peaks watching over everything. Chumash culture itself, like most Native American traditions, includes a belief in beings that can shift between animal and human forms, which aligns with what we know as skinwalker legends. Brian believes that before 1937, there were no publications mentioning the Dark Watchers, which may indicate that this was a modern urban legend created in the 20th century, rather than an ancient myth. A second popular theory among some mountaineers and scholars is that the so-called Dark Watchers are actually a rare Brockenspector phenomenon, also known as the glory effect, a visual illusion caused when a shadow is cast onto distant mist by a strong light source, making the shadow appear enormous. This explanation is similar to the Big Gray Man of Ben Macdouey Mountain. Indeed, aside from the fact that the Dark Watchers do not produce audible footsteps, their descriptions are strikingly similar to the Big Gray Man. On the Shadow Observer's website, there is a sighting report from 2018 stating that a witness, while hiking along Highway 33 in Ojai, felt as though they were being watched and instinctively looked up toward the mountain ridge, where they saw a dark figure. As a joke, the witness waved at the shadow. To their surprise, the shadow mimicked their exact movement and waved back. Then the witness took a puff of their cigarette, only to see the shadow also exhale a plume of smoke. This description is eerily similar to the encounters reported in the Big Gray Man sightings. Canadian psychologist Graham Reed, in his 1972 book The Psychology of Anomalous Experience, stated that fatigue often disrupts logical judgment, making people more susceptible to suggestion and prone to hallucinations and misinterpretations, especially in cases where large ghostly figures are reported in the mountains. Fatigue and isolation are likely key factors that cause hikers and mountaineers to report anomalous experiences as their primary explanation. If we analyze the likelihood of the Dark Watchers being an actual humanoid entity, I believe it is quite unlikely. First, as Professor Bryan mentioned, I could not find any written records predating the 1930s in either English or Spanish using related keywords. As for the claims that the claim that a Chumash rock painting depicts the Dark Watchers is also inaccurate. This rock painting actually represents children and the sun as part of a celestial ritual, where they play gambling games on the eve of winter to predict whether the next year's harvest will be scarce. As for the characteristics of disappearing instantly and mimicking human movements, the Brockenspector theory is likely the most reasonable and scientifically sound explanation. As for the shadowy figure wearing a wide-brimmed hat and holding a staff, I believe this is likely the result of storytelling changes and exaggerations over time, much like an evolving urban legend. In today's era of rapid technological advancement, our attitude toward these unidentified mysterious beings has become more rational, but that does not mean these legends will disappear. On the contrary, they will continue to exist as part of culture and be passed down through folklore, becoming stories people share in conversation. So let's continue to embrace curiosity with a sense of curiosity and reverence. Let's continue to discover and embrace the wonders and mysteries of this world. Alright, as the Lunar New Year approaches, I, Lyman, would like to wish all my friends watching a year filled with prosperity and good fortune, with wealth flowing in abundance. At the same time, a special thanks to Han Schauscher for providing research support for this episode. And finally, as always, the unknown will always be greater than the known. That is the true allure of UMA. That's it for this episode. Thank you for watching.